Open the meeting of the Planning Commission, April 2nd. My name is Eduardo Simeoni. I am the acting chairman tonight in the absence of Paul Travis. Good evening.
Hey.
Let's see, tonight, first of all, we have the FEMA report, which has been completed. It is now in front of the trustees for evaluation and for public comment. And while that process is occurring, the moratorium has been extended. So I won't go into the details of the FEMA report that already has been discussed, and it will be presented by the trustees. Next thing I want to review is the sewer project. Again, very briefly, we had an opportunity to meet with H2M, Frank Russo, who gave us details to the trustees and the village officials, and the planning commission gave a presentation, which was very interesting, but mainly the purpose was mainly to understand where they were going. They had some questions concerning how to structure certain aspects, such as.
Was everyone here at that
It
meeting?
was just me. It was just me and Paul were able to be present. And the purpose was to determine how to structure the sewer district, whether we should incorporate or not certain areas. They explained to us how the sewer itself would be planned with a minimum disruption to the village, which was very interesting, going behind a lot of the structures. Also concentrating the what do you call the
collection?
The collection, yeah. Concentrating the collection units.
And the pump stations.
And the pump stations, just in certain areas, so that they could connect as many buildings as possible. So those are the type of things we went through. They also discussed the fees, how the fees would be structured, which is very important, whether it should be limited to who is receiving the service, or whether it should be contribution by the whole village. So all these things that need to be addressed and refined. So the report is going to be prepared for the beginning of the summer. H2M will come back again and make a presentation so that then we can discuss the details and have public comment on it as well. Tonight, we're going to discuss mainly the parking situation. Apparently, there's been many complaints. Go ahead.
Just one more question. I think I've
Sure.
asked this before regarding the sewer district. I just wondered if you knew what the status was of not the sewer district itself, but all the drainage efforts to capture stormwater.
That was not part of the report. I think
no discussion on
no
that.
discussion on that. I think that's really a separate issue altogether.
Yeah.
Although I remember when we first discussed it with H2M with Frank Russo, we asked him if he could incorporate that. But that was not part of the presentation. So I don't know. Maybe we need to readdress that with him. Maybe we should give him a call and see what his thoughts are on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be valuable if they're gonna do another presentation.
Yeah. Anyway, concerning the parking, apparently there's been a lot of complaints about the parking, and mainly cars are being parked on the street. And presently the village allows, well, parking is determined by the number of bedrooms. I understand that for dwelling you need to have 2 parking spaces. And then for each bedroom over and beyond 3 bedrooms, there's 1 parking space. And that's defined pretty loosely. Carport and a garage is also considered a parking space. But there is no definition as to whether cars are allowed to be stacked or actually, right now, since there is no definition as to what a parking space really is, cars can be stacked and counted as a parking space. And that may be presenting the problem. There's also some evidence of bedroom creep when plans will call for a certain number of bedrooms, but basements are built at a certain height with egress windows that then will allow later for someone to add bedrooms without taking into consideration of what the parking spaces are really allowed for the number of bedrooms that you really have. So a 4-bedroom house could suddenly become a 5-bedroom or 6-bedroom house. And all this is happening because the regulations are not really clear and do not define how to consider how many bedrooms a house has and/or pretty loosely the parking spaces that one has in the driveway. So some suggestions has been made in order to correct this. We need to be able to predict how many bedrooms a dwelling will actually have once it is constructed, not just by the plans. And as an example, I understand that the village of East Hampton will count as a bedroom if, for example, the plans show a bathroom in the basement. If you have a bathroom in the basement, then most probably the intention is to add a bedroom. Other indications could be egress windows. If you are adding egress windows and you have high ceilings, that also allows you to add rooms or bedrooms in the basement. Although I don't have a problem with people having bedrooms, but of course, the more bedrooms you have, more people can live in the house, more cars can park, and you are not, now you're skirting the parking regulations that we have. The driveway. Right now, if you have a driveway which is, let's say, 8 feet wide and goes straight to a garage, and you're supposed to have 3 or 4 parking spaces, these parking spaces will be counted just by the length of the cars in the driveway. But that creates a problem because, of course, if you are parking your cars and you want to move a car, you'd have to move all your cars in order to get on the street. And the feeling is that a lot of people, in order to avoid this inconvenience, are parking the cars on the street. And that's creating the problem that we're addressing right now. As a suggestion to resolve that, and again, the Village of East Hampton has come up with a definition that a car should have direct access to the street, which means either you have wider driveways or areas where cars can move around and pass without having to move all the cars to go to the street. Another suggestion, maybe not as palatable, is maybe restricting parking on the street with no parking area zones or no parking during certain hours, for example, no overnight parking, in order to force residents to park on their driveways. Although, if we could do without that kind of regulation, I think we would prefer that. Another suggestion is what the health department determines. The health department will determine how many bedrooms a dwelling can have based on the size of the lot and the size of the septic system. And they will actually tell you, once you present the plans, how many bedrooms are allowed in a house. Now, the plans for the building usually are approved before the health department gives the final determination. So maybe there's a need for a system that the number of bedrooms in a home can be finalized only after the health department comes back. So these are some of the suggestions that were given, and I open it to discussion if anybody else has other suggestions or what do you think about these.
Well, I think, doesn't the health department actually, they give you a certain number of room credit for living rooms, and then beyond that, they count them as bedrooms? They do have a formula, I don't know what
No,
it
it's
is.
just a number of bedrooms.
Just a number of bedrooms,
But
yeah.
the health department is not, I don't think it's a good guide for the parking regulations, because it's, you can always put a bigger tank. You know, if you add another bedroom or 2 bedrooms downstairs in the basement, what you do, so part of the cost is to replace the tank with a bigger tank, and then you get more bedrooms.
Well, I have a question. I mean, okay, say you build a house and you don't finish the basement.
Mhm.
Do you need a permit to finish the basement?
Yes.
You do.
But not, you don't always get a permit.
Yeah,
I
Okay.
mean,
Well, I
I
mean,
think what's happening is that the basements are finished without the permit and,
That's
and
what I
without,
think.
and without tying the number of bedrooms in with the actual parking spaces. that
well,
you
or
have.
attic in the reverse, but yes, I think so. I think so.
The question, if it comes after the fact and you don't have the parking spaces, then
Yeah, no.
I mean, on top of it, very often, in some areas, like right in the village, where there's so much parking that it's difficult even to get into your own driveway. That people across the street, so there should even be like no parking areas if you're directly across the street from another driveway. That's,
now I understand your street, you have a lot of
Yeah,
problems
exactly.
with cars parking in the street.
exactly.
I know that there's some
I
streets
mean, right
that
across
have
from me, my
parking
house.
on one side and not parking on the other.
Yeah,
I've seen in the village, there are those streets.
right.
They allow parking on one side, not on the other.
They would allow a parking on the side, yeah.
Well, I don't know, if you had a chance to look at the East Hampton Village parking, I'd like to read that one. See
No,
what they're-
this was, Paul, apparently, there's these two regulations that East Hampton does have
Mhm.
that allows them to pretty much define ahead of time, number one, the potential bedrooms. So
Mhm.
again, if you do have a bathroom in the basement, they do count it as a bedroom, so that the person puts in a bedroom, it's fine, you know. But I think the most important one is the fact that cars need to have direct access to
Yeah,
the street.
I think that that's it.
And that I think would go a long ways to resolving the issue, because I don't think people want to park on the street so much as it's an inconvenience for if you have 3, 4 cars stacked and you want to move your car, then you have to move all the cars in order to get out. So that, I think, is what's creating most of the problem.
Well, then that's gonna create, you know, you have to have wider driveways.
You have to have wider driveways, which will, of course, mean maybe the houses need to be
Repositioned on the.
repositioned, planned
on-
differently.
Yeah, right. So that
Uh,
means setbacks, side, front, back, you know, they would have to
Yeah,
be
you won't,
adjusted.
you won't have to change that, but
You wouldn't?
of course, if you're gonna take up more space on the property for parking, then maybe the house cannot be as large.
Well, I know that cars cannot be visible from the street, is parked cars?
I think
There should be
now
some
they
sort of
do
screen?
allow, yeah, you have to have screening, but I think you are allowed to have parking in front of the house, as long
As long
as
as
there's,
it's screened,
yeah, as
or,
long as it's screened.
yeah, as long as it's screened.
Yeah.
Screen, yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's plenty of opportunities to be able to plan without, you know, the idea is not to take away property rights, of course, but
Right.
I'm sure that it is possible to be able to plan and define parking in such a way that you are not forced to go parking on the street, and you still can have a beautiful home, you know, but it has to be planned properly.
But I think that we also have some specific areas in the village where the streets are very narrow.
They are narrow, some of
And
them.
I think maybe the regulations could be tied to the width of the street. That when the street is really narrow, the enforcement should be tighter, or
You're talking about no parking, because right now
Either no parking, like-
there is no
Yeah,
parking.
on Oak
I
Street,
get
Pine
it,
Street,
yeah,
or,
uh-huh.
you know, those areas are very narrow, even, you know. And they're building those big homes, 5-bedroom homes.
No, I also want to make define the issue here though, because of course, going forward, we can set regulations that will be more appropriate for the newer homes going up so that we don't have this problem, but this will not solve the problem throughout the village. Of course, because the house is already built, parking areas are already what they are. So in the communities where the houses already exist, you're still gonna continue having this problem unless you address it differently, not only
Well,
for
with
new
parking
construction,
zones.
but
Yeah,
either
right.
with parking zones or that parking areas need to be reconstructed. I mean, if we want to solve the problem in your street, for example,
Yeah,
unless
this is
it's new building, this will not solve the problem. So
I'm
what
sure-
ideas do you have for
Yeah,
that?
but I think that we could do have some regulations that you cannot park directly across the street from a driveway. So at least when you're able to get into your driveway, sometimes I have to go around the street to go into my own driveway.
Is that problem all the time, or is it seasonal, or is it?
It's, well, seasonal.
More
yes,
seasonal.
It's seasonal.
But there's a limit to how long you can park a car on a public street, isn't?
No, there's no.
There is
there's
no-
That's a
regulation
good
right now.
point.
You mean it can
That's
be
a
for
good point.
weeks? I
There
thought
is,
it was like, you can do it overnight, but then you have to move it, no?
I mean, there would be no oversight.
I'm sure.
But there's no, as far as I know, and maybe Mark knows better, but I don't think there's any regulations on the street for no parking or anything. right?
But
Unless it says no parking.
Yeah, but I don't think
it's a good,
on.
it's a good
Well,
point,
unless
though.
it's
We should
clearly
limit
defined
the
by
time.
sign.
Huh?
Just in some parking lots that are public parking lots, there's no overnight parking, preventing people from living in a car in a parking lot, so. But on the streets, I don't think there is any.
There, okay, I thought there was some sort of unwritten.
It's, in the streets that have no parking are all designated streets. It's in the code, set up by times mostly.
That's a good point, to set a time limit.
I'm sorry.
Well,
To-
to
to
set
put
a, set a
time
time limit, again, you need oversight, you need people
Yeah,
checking,
but
so.
the neighbor will check.
But,
You need somebody with the chalk.
but what you could do, I mean, I don't really favor, I like it the way it is right now, that you don't have a lot of regulations and whatnot. But maybe there can be no overnight parking, for example, so that people are forced at a certain point
To
to
put
move the
in.
cars and.
But I think
once they
that
put them
the
in.
issue came up with if someone is planning a house and it's a large home and they haven't really adequately thought about where all the cars are gonna go. I
Yes.
think that's one of the major things that we're.
Yes, for the new homes, definitely, that's
It's
why.
like an afterthought, I
Yeah,
know.
that's,
Right.
that's why I think requiring direct access should resolve
Mhm.
the problem, because at that point, if you do have direct access, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be parking on the property. In my property, for example, when I planned my home, I thought about that, and I planned it so that I have parking, I can park 5, 6 cars, and all 6 cars will have direct access to the driveway and to the street. I don't have to move a car around in order to move a car. But, everything depends also how things are structured. But if that's planned properly, I think that goes a long way solving for the new homes. The question is, how about the problem that exists in the established neighborhoods?
Well, even with the new homes, if they're on a small lot, Eduardo, with pyramid laws and everything else,
Right.
it could be an issue, because they are building on lots of smaller lots in the
Correct.
village.
Correct. But they have to be able to provide the parking,
Yeah, but it might impact their plan for the home.
yes.
So what would the next sort of step be for us to maybe review some other sample codes, and maybe circulate and discuss those? Did,
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I think we should.
Yeah, and I'll obviously see, how these suggestions, whether they are practical and how they can be implemented, maybe speak to the building department and see what John Foster thinks as well. You can probably give us a lot of insights as to, how parking is determined and what can be done in order to improve it.
We need a grid. See what streets are small.
I'd also be interested to know, if the problem is really endemic in the whole village. For example, where I live, I really don't have a problem. No one parks on the street.
Well, White Street is one of the larger streets, and that's your entrance. Now, if you go down Halsey Street, especially with all that building going on, I ran into a problem myself the other day, where there were all the cars for the builders,
Well, for the
they're on the
builders.
sides.
Yeah, for the builders.
And you have to be able to, that's a
Right.
two-way street. I was stopped, the guy in front of me was stopped. And actually, even, I had to back up so that he could get out and then I could go.
Right, no, and those
Right.
houses are very big.
Yeah,
That's
and
happened.
they're
Because
good-
in the
yeah,
summer,
but I mean, that,
they're gonna have all their guests parking on the
yeah,
street.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's a temporary issue with the building.
Well,
you
it's
know.
temporary,
They-
except for that it highlights the issue of cars parked
Parking
on the
street,
side
right.
of the street.
But what I was saying is whether this is a problem that is, that affects the whole village, only certain areas. Again, where I live, I've never had a problem. I don't see cars parked on Coopers, I don't see cars,
Well, those are
parked-
wide
Wide streets,
streets,
those
those
are
are
not
very
wide- Yeah,
wide
but
streets.
still they're not parking cars on the street.
Actually, Eduardo, when you had the landscapers on Cooper's Farm Road on both sides of the street, and you had that curve,
Right, but that's
That-
landscapers, we're talking about people parking their private cars.
no, I
Landscapers
understand,
is
but I mean,
temporary.
parking, okay, you're gonna make just private parking,
I'm talking about automobiles,
No,
not
no, I
not the
understand, but
landscapers or,
whatever issue there is, we're just going to apply it to private parking?
to
Parking on the
private,
lot.
private
On your lot.
automobiles, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can't tell the landscaper, you can't,
No, no, I
Parking is
understand that,
vehicle,
no, no,
right.
no, I understand,
so that is the issue.
Can I
Yeah,
just
sure.
make, I'm Bruce Bachman, I'm one of the directors of the Southampton Association. Actually, in the last month, I guess, Jay Deasing and a few others have been doing exactly this street by street. And have actually found streets that if you had parking on them, you couldn't get the fire department down that street. I think we're finding a massive buildup of larger houses on small lots. So I think you're gonna have a much larger percentage of the village impacted 6 months from now
I think so
than
too.
you can see. Which, both of those show some urgency on this issue from the safety perspective, over and above building rights and all those sorts of things. I think probably if Jay were here, he could probably give you street by street, at least in the middle of the village, where the problems are. But I think if you do the analysis, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a massive one that takes 3 months, I think you'll see where the problems are, and it's where all the big houses are being built on small lots,
Right.
and there's no adequate
Parking.
driveways. And if you don't do it quickly, the cat's out of the bag, and it's gonna be a minor problem, because there won't be any more small lots left. So, but it is clear that each street has a different situation. But the ones like Halsey, which I go down every day on the way to the post office, it's dodgems. It's just dodgems. You're backing up, you're letting other people come, and if you have some are parking that way, and an inability to basically get safety equipment and things easily to all the houses along there, it's gonna be a real problem. It's not aesthetics, this one, this is really impractical.
Which is somewhat what I was getting at, that's why I'm saying that, so, you know, is it endemic the whole village, or maybe there's certain areas that really need to be addressed and concentrate on as to how to address the problem and.
I mean, it's
eliminate
clearly
that.
related to lot size, because
Yeah.
obviously if it's a
Well,
large
Well,
lot,
well,
there's gonna be.
lot size and
Well-
street width.
Well,
Street width.
Well, in the end, it's really on-site parking. I mean,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
people are not parking in the street, you don't have a problem. So yes.
I mean, you know, what I think it really boils down to is the definition of a bedroom. And, because when you're looking at the parking, the, Department of Health they define what a bedroom is.
Right.
So someone might say, well, that's an office. That office might turn into a bedroom the moment the CO is issued. So the Department of Health has the standards, and it's not applied, consistently throughout the building department. So we don't have it in our code. So, I mean, I'd like to see a recommendation would come back and say, a bedroom is defined, just a simple statement, bedroom's defined as per the Suffolk County Department of Health's definition of a bedroom. And they have a very in-depth bedroom, so it's no question to ask.
Right.
Oh, what a bed, so when a guy who's building on Old Town comes in and says, I'm not building the bedrooms in the basement, he has to build, he's still gonna have to show septic for it, he's still gonna have to show parking on the lot
Because
for
in the
it.
future, it could
Yeah,
always
but
be
the
converted.
Because they can convert it, the moment the CO's issued,
Right.
they're gonna go in and they're gonna finish off
Right.
basements.
But right now.
So you like the
allow-
idea of the health department
Yeah,
defining.
and that's, it's a debatable topic within the building department, within the building inspectors, they talk about this, and some interpret it one way, some interpret it another way. I think it's is our responsibility to put this and codify it within there, and just saying, a bedroom is this.
Right.
And it's as the way Department of Health defines it, and it's really, it's black and white, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Which then leads us to, once we've defined the bedrooms, then means that they have to show parking on site for every bedroom.
Right.
So if it's an 8-bedroom house, they're gonna have to show 7 spots there. And if they can't show 7 spots on there, then they can't build a 5,000 square foot, 6,000 square foot house on a, 0.4 of an acre, or whatever the numbers are.
Right, but
You know?
we need to define also, you're absolutely right on the definition of bedroom, and then it comes to the definition of the parking space.
Right.
Is, along the driveway, is it allowed, can you count just 3, 4 parking spaces when in fact it's just a driveway?
Well,
That's why
I
I
mean,
say have to have
and
the right
that's where East Hampton's definition of a residential parking spot,
Excellent.
which is something I think we should look at, contemplate adopting, and forces people to be able to, because
Yes.
if you're stacking up in a driveway, and you have to pull 3 cars out to get the 4th one out, that's when bicyclers or joggers or walkers can all get injured. There's a potential for that because people aren't thinking it in those terms. So from a safety standpoint. And then another piece that is that we can actually have a garage 5 feet from the property line, but the parking spots have to be 10 feet from the parking line, from the property line. So we actually should line all of that stuff up. And historically, in a lot of the neighborhoods and the smaller lots, we've always parked kind of right on the property line. So if we allow parking at that 5-foot point and right along the garage, then then actually you could end up with the wider driveways closer to the house, and kind of move into a smaller exit, do something like that.
And that might be subject to screening as well.
Well, it could be, it could.
I mean, so for your neighbors.
Yeah, you could, yeah, I mean, that's, a lot of people are planting hedges along.
I know,
and
but I
stuff, so,
mean, if they don't, it could be an issue with the neighbor, I
Right.
suppose.
Yeah,
Are you talking about the driveway itself has to be,
if
10
you,
feet?
if you're, yeah, well, no, not the driveway can be the 5 feet, but the parking has to be, your parking has to be 10
Oh,
feet away
yeah.
from the property line.
right, that's a problem,
So you can have a garage that's 5 feet from the property line,
right?
but yet you have parking spots and they have to be 10 feet from the property line. So it doesn't, it's just an issue with the code that we do need to, really straighten up, so.
Yes.
But, we have applications coming in all the time that, we need to really address. I think we've got some good starts here with East Hampton's code on defining the parking spot, Department of Health defining the bedroom, and then making that adjustment to the parking line, so.
Right.
And,
And how do we address the areas where you have established neighborhoods? Because this addresses new construction, which
Yeah.
is important, but
Right.
new construction is a small portion of the whole village. How do we address the rest of the village?
that's a very interesting, when we talk about Halsey Street, one of the things that we had done from a construction standpoint is we had, did legislation on having people requiring to get a parking pass, the builders, the contractors, in each one of the sites. But if you drive around, many of the areas, you won't see the contractors with those parking passes in their windshield. And the reason why is because the streets, you can park anywhere on the street. So I can't go and tell a contractor,
Right,
you can't park here, but yet the guy who lives across the street could park on the same street and I get a ticket.
right.
So it really boils down to identifying the narrow roads, and maybe it goes into defining parking on one side of the street. Maybe it's it's defining parking hours. The other piece is from a pure streetscape standpoint. We want signs all over the place. These are all things that you get into, and so if we can really get people and then also people get the CO, and then they go and they'll put a swimming pool in their backyard and a fence off their backyard. eliminate parking spots and stuff, so, and then forces people into the streets. So those are issues that have, and not even a new house being built. So, I know some streets, I know one person who closed off half their driveway and created a basketball court. You know, and so where are you parking at? You're parking on the street. You know, wasn't me or my kids or anything. So,
So the question is, how do you keep them from parking on the street?
that's the question. And really what you have to do is identify roads and create no parking zones.
Right,
And that's the only way you can really go through and enforce it.
which I hate to do, but,
I hate to do it too, because
I
you
don't
get
like to do
into,
it.
I don't like it.
Signage and all that other stuff.
And, yeah, if you have a party and you invite friends over, then it's, you come in here asking for, relief from the parking regulations and stuff, so, those are things. So if we can really push towards getting all parking on site, and the houses being in the appropriate number of bedrooms, and those are things that I think will pay dividends for us,
Right.
but,
well, that helps. But
Yeah.
then again, if you are throwing a party, I guess you gotta be able to park on the street.
Right.
Not everybody.
Yeah.
Well, you invite your neighbors.
But you get your.
Invite
Invite
your
your
neighbors, so they,
Invite your
Invite your
neighbors.
first rule of having a party, invite your neighbors.
Invite your neighbors.
Huh?
You get the parking.
You get the permits
Yeah.
here at the village.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
you do, you put them in the window.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you should consider for existing residences, maybe giving them even greater flexibility to add parking. Because that's obviously somebody who knows there's a problem, and they're even recognizing that they probably don't want to park out on the street, because with construction trucks going by, with landscape trucks going by, easy to sideswipe, easy to get into a situation where you know that it's hazardous, you're living on the street, so that might be an individual where you'd want to say, gee, we're willing to give you a little bit more leeway on the front, putting some parking there, or coming a little bit closer to the sideline, so that we could encourage people to get cars off the streets.
Yeah.
that's
Uh,
interesting.
But I still think they should be screened somewhat, don't you?
Oh,
Jay?
absolutely, yeah.
That's interesting. Well, would you propose that we contact the homeowners, or the homeowners contact the
If they have
village?
a vehicle, there's a,
Because there's a cost involved, obviously, in creating a larger parking space, a cost, and maybe aesthetics won't be as nice as what they have right now. So I don't know if the homeowners would come forward unless they are forced to be able to have to do that because they have no place to put their cars.
Right, parking tickets, I mean, that's enforcement, and maybe saying that the option here is the village is gonna have to start enforcing unless residents find ways of increasing on-site parking. And if nobody participates in your plan, then you have to pick streets, and unfortunately, you're gonna have some unhappy campers.
But I like your idea of being flexible. I mean, if somebody's used up his allotment of space on their property, to be flexible with the zoning board to allow, more coverage and whatnot.
But I think
Nice
we,
idea.
on the newer properties, we have to make sure if somebody's coming in and they're fencing off the backyard and putting a pool in, they may have to consider an L-shaped parking where they've got some parking in the front of the house, if they're gonna be taking away parking in the back. Because it really is on narrow streets, it's a real safety issue backing out. I
Yes.
mean, we see it on Woolley Street,
yeah,
Post Crossing,
Yeah,
it's really
And
dangerous.
it's aesthetics as well.
And I agree with you.
But I think you weren't here, but the idea of requiring direct access cars to the street, that'll definitely, address that, and making sure that we also address the number of actual bedrooms that will be in that house, so that the adequate parking is built, and not that somebody puts in 3 bedrooms and then suddenly they become 6 or something.
I think the direct access is,
That's
I think
paramount.
that's
That's-
critical.
because then you can move around people, you
Yeah,
can
it's
measure it.
critical.
There's no budging it and saying, oh, I can just move the cars.
Definition
that's
of
critical.
bedrooms can be very loosey-goosey. A closet, okay, is that the only definition?
But that's why the Department of Health has a very well-defined definition of a bedroom.
It does.
Yeah.
It does,
Yes.
and it's a standard.
It's a standard definition, but it gets applied sometimes in some houses, it gets applied in different, and it's not consistent. So we need to codify the definition of a bedroom, and then we need to do the same thing with the definition of a residential parking spot.
Yes.
The
And,
health department, do they determine that after the plans have been approved, or they determine at the same time or before? The reason I say that, because you have plans that are put before the ARV and whatnot, get approved, and the building, and
Here's-
then afterwards, the health department gives their determination.
here's what I would say to that. They're not gonna issue a CO until the health department, so it's up to the architect. It's the architect and the builder and the owner's responsibility to know the definition of a bedroom through the Department of Health. And if they come in and design a home, and it's an 8-bedroom home, and they come back and if they say it's 5 and it turns out to be an 8-bedroom home, according to the Department of Health standard, that's their issue. And if they have to go back and redesign the house, they have to go back and redesign the house. You know, and, but we've gotta have it written in our code so that way everybody knows this is what a bedroom is. So they can't come in and say, well, that's not a bedroom, it's an office.
Right.
But,
Yeah,
but you
or it
can't,
doesn't- it
you
doesn't
can't
matter.
require they rebuild the house, and that's the real
Oh,
problem.
well.
The
I mean,
architect
that's-
is one,
yeah,
but the
that's-
second
yeah,
step
yeah.
is.
Well, we have the existing and we have the future
Yeah.
component. So the future is actually something we can deal with.
Yeah, easier.
You know, the existing piece
The
is a whole.
renovation is the issue,
Yeah, even if somebody goes to renovate their home, again, that's all in the future. But the existing piece is where we have homes that don't have ample parking on site. You know, we'll have to get through and look at, you know, doing some, no parking zones in certain areas. You know, it's a,
Yes.
that's the most difficult piece, is what's already out there.
Okay, so I think that let's make a point to review
I'm-
other towns' regulations.
I'm happy to circulate, I can go look it up and circulate it around, so if we wanna look at
Yeah,
East Hampton
I
Village, if
understand,
there's any
Jay, you
others.
already did some,
Yeah, the streets, the looking at different streets, different widths, different, which ones are where.
I understand, Jay, you already did a survey?
I think there's a report that Lisa LaCory sent to the village. I don't know if you've gotten a copy. If you
No,
haven't,
I haven't seen it.
I will get it to you. I'll get you that. And it talks about a lot of the issues with stacked parking and what some of the other regulations are in different villages. And we've just gone around and done sort of a very unscientific, but we've measured streets and they're as narrow as 18, and obviously some are as wide as, obviously First Neck Lane is a very wide street. You can park on both sides and still get 2 cars through. On some of our streets, if you have a truck, you can only get 1 car through on the other side.
So as a suggestion then, if we're gonna put no parking regulations or parking only on one side regulations, we should look at the streets, at the width of the streets and determine it by that.
Yeah, that's,
If we do that, then, let's say we can allow one side, parking on one side, not on the other, then we don't have to worry too much about the established residences and whether they have to increase the parking, if we can allow that for them. I would presume.
well, only, like if I live on the opposite side of this, if I live on one side of the street and they allow parking on my side, so I'm gonna get those folks to park in front of my house.
You're not gonna like that.
No?
Well, that is
No parking at all
actually,
then.
that becomes the big debate.
Yeah.
Which side is gonna be the no parking zone.
Yeah, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And it involves signs. I think we really want to try and avoid as much on-street parking as possible.
Yes, right.
And you also do have to take into account the volume on the street. So for example, Post Lane,
Post
which is pretty much a dead-end street. Cars can park there and there's really not a safety hazard, because it's not a through road. But if you have cars parking on both sides of Post Crossing, you're gonna risk your life walking or driving down that street. And so, you know, it actually would be a pretty intensive survey to kind of figure out which fits in which spot. But I think to the extent that we can get more and more cars parked on the site, because we've, you know, unfortunately, we've sort of lost the battle with workers and landscapers. I mean, 20 years ago, they parked on the property.
Right.
Not anymore. They get their cones out and they block the
Well, and they
entire
have these
street.
huge things.
And they have these massive trucks and, yeah.
And this is a problem, we've had this discussion about this in the mayor's and supervisor's meeting, because this is a problem throughout the entire East End. Because they, they're driving around with their offices tied on the back of their truck, and, yeah, it's a problem, every place. It's difficult, so.
Maybe we could tie up that valet parking service you were looking at with the landscapers, and they could just get dropped off,
Yeah,
and somebody would drive their truck around all day.
Yeah, drop off your equipment, right? Yeah. Why
Could
not?
work.
Yeah.
Just one silly little factor, I think the width of the street is not the only issue. I live in Halsey Neck, and we're wide enough, but I'll tell you, cars parked there are really a danger because of the speeds that people achieve going up and down. And we had problems until we got it corrected with regard to the puddles and the water. People were going like this and trying to avoid going through the water. That got solved. But one of the factors you should go into this is not just the width, but basically how the street is driven.
Yes,
Because you could have plenty of cars on Halsey Neck and have a really dangerous situation.
yes. Well, maybe you consider speed bumps.
Yeah, we talked about that, I got half my neighbors who think that's a great idea,
You can't do speed bumps,
but I won't do it.
You can't do speed bumps?
No.
you can't put speed bumps in on public streets.
And somebody would hit that thing going really hard. I saw it happen in San Francisco, they
Why?
put one in the tunnel going over to the Oakland, because they were building up the tunnel bed floor, and some guy hit it at 90 miles an hour in a sports car, and he went right off the top of the upper tunnel.
I was just gonna say the
That's
Ferraris
extreme, but
that we
that
see,
can
they're
happen,
gonna get
it's
wrecked.
dangerous.
Yeah. But you can't put speed bumps in, you can actually, there's grinders where you can actually create dentions in
Oh,
that
yeah.
actually slow people, you can do that, but then the neighbors complain because every time the car goes across in the middle of the night, that's all they hear. So, you know, that's the only thing you can do.
Well, I think we have to be really judicious in designating no parking zones, to be really well thought out.
And then we design a nice sign.
But what I'd like for you guys to do is that at the next meeting, come back and finalize some recommendations to the village board over the definition of a bedroom, the definition of a parking spot, and then also the 5-foot setback and the 10, those three things. And then the
Direct access, the East Hampton regulation about
Yeah.
direct access.
well, however, whatever your recommendation is.
Well, I'm happy to gather the information and circulate it if we all want to look at the
Yes.
same bits of
Okay.
information.
Right. But we also ought to go through the village and see, you know, what is definition of a narrow street, what's the definition of a wider street?
Yeah, we could do that.
Well, those two
Jay's
things,
gonna
one
send
is
us the
addressing
report.
this on-site parking issue, which we should definitely do first. and
Okay.
Then there's the whole issue
All
of
right, and then that's the,
Parking.
okay,
on-street
Yeah.
parking.
okay.
All right. If there's no further business, I adjourn the meeting.
Second?
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, guys.